Sorry, Homer Simpson. Nuclear power is having a different kind of moment.
To solve climate change, we have to decarbonize. Don't worry, babe, we're not coming for your carbs.
As Gen Z plugs technology that's as old as their grandparents.
Atomic energy is released safely
as a savior from fossil fuel.
Well, the science is fairly clear that you cannot solve climate change at this point, or even remotely begin thinking about it, without nuclear energy being at the forefront.
Even the reigning Miss America, a nuclear engineer, is promoting nuclear power.
Nuclear is already a part of your life. You just don't know it.
Big picture, 1/4 of America's emissions come from coal and natural gas power plants. Nuclear generates 18% of our electricity and nearly half of America's clean energy, because nuclear has no emissions. This is just water vapor. So, is nuclear power the secret sauce in addressing climate change? And if so, can it be used safely?
It's not scary in that it's actually super reliable and super safe.
To explore the answer, I traveled to Georgia, on the banks of the Savannah River. Southern Company CEO Chris Womack showed me around the first new nuclear reactors to be approved and built in the US since the 70s, which have more layers of safety than older designs.
A lot of consideration, a lot of planning goes into operating nuclear facilities to make them safe. And we feel good about where we are. We feel good about this technology. We feel very good about these plants.
But they're powering up at double their original cost and 6 years behind schedule.
It just takes so long to build a new nuclear plant. It's on the order right now of 15 to 21 years between planning and operation of a new plant.
Stanford engineer Mark Jacobson mapped out a plan to power America entirely on solar, wind, and water. No nuclear.
We have an immediate benefit of replacing fossil fuels with wind and solar as fast as possible. So if we're taking 17 years to replace it, a lot of people are dying in the meantime. Climate problems are getting worse. But there are additional problems with nuclear that you question, well, why would we even go down that route?
He's talking about highly radioactive waste, known as spent fuel. Since the US currently doesn't have a home for it, it gets stored on site at nuclear plants across 35 states. At Plant Vogtle, it's deep in this crystal blue pool.
The water keeps it cool, and so thus you don't have the reaction of the uranium.
But that's not a permanent solution, says this longtime nuclear policy expert.
You remember the old saying that those who've failed to learn the lessons of the past are condemned to repeat them. And that is the problem. If we don't learn the lessons of the problems of nuclear power, we will repeat the accident risks, the proliferation risks, the nuclear waste risks, which is what drives the nuclear waste debate, that we get 50 years of power and 500,000 years of waste the future generations will really curse us for.
But there's a chorus of today's younger generation.
I know you're worried about what might happen 19,000 years from now, but
who view climate change as the risk, not nuclear power.
If you realize that that's the fear and not just what do we do with this waste, nuclear waste isn't uniquely dangerous, and we've known how to handle it for decades. So clearly it's not the physical issue of the waste.
Part of their support is for new technology, small modular nuclear reactors. They're small enough to be built in a factory and then shipped to the place where they'll generate power, potentially making them cheaper. Now, when you look at the sources of US emissions, advocates say the small reactors could zero out half of America's emissions. One, by converting existing coal and natural gas plants into nuclear plants, and the Inflation Reduction Act even offers tax credits for that. And two, by generating power on site for heavy industry. Think steel manufacturing, where they currently have to burn fossil fuel. Now, the downside is that researchers project they'll produce more of that highly radioactive waste. So back to the question, is nuclear power the secret sauce in addressing climate change? Well, here's one more expert to weigh in, the director of the Energy Transition Institute.
We have to balance it against the cost of climate change. And climate change is really, really bad. Climate change has a massive scale, and it's going to be very hard to solve climate change if we cut certain things just completely out of the portfolio. And so I think that the question about nuclear is where and when does it make sense? And remember that it can be part of the solution to climate change.